The transmission cut off mid-sentence. Static hissed through the Galactic Council's emergency channels. The last words of the convoy breaking apart into jagged fragments. Shields failing. The stars burning red, then nothing. The silence that followed was worse than any explosion. Dozens of ships had vanished, diplomats, ambassadors, and their escorts gone into the place every navigator feared, the Dead Veil Nebula. A place where stars pulsed wrong, where ships entered but never returned. The council chamber erupted with panic. Voices clashed in a storm of accusation and dread. "They've been raided." One shouted, "No pirates avoid the Dead Veil." Another countered. A third voice, quieter but sharper, cut through them all. "Then perhaps it is humanity. That is where they vanished before." The word humanity rippled through the chamber like a chill wind. The younger species looked puzzled, but the older ones shivered, their memories long and heavy. Humanity was a name half remembered in rumor, a race banished from council space centuries ago, monsters of war, brilliant and merciless. And now, their shadows seemed to hang over this disappearance, far from the council's bickering. In the cold silence of the veil itself, the missing convoy drifted. The ships floated, crippled, their hulls scorched from a solar storm that had erupted without warning. Life support flickered. Power cells drained. Alien voices whispered in the dark, trembling as air thinned and heat bled away. "We are dying here," hissed a Vakari officer, his claws scraping metal. "The council will not send rescue. None dare come where humans linger." His words silenced the chamber. Even the youngest among them had heard the tales. Outside, the nebula moved like a living thing, vast clouds, coiling and twisting in silence. Lightning crackled in its belly, blue veins lashing across the void. Every few minutes, a sensor flared and died, as if the nebula itself rejected their machines. The survivors huddled in fear. Every sound inside the ship seemed too loud. The cough of a child, the rattle of a failing filter, the quiet sobs of diplomats who had no armies, no weapons, no hope. And then something changed. A flicker of motion. One of the younger crew pressed his face against a viewport, eyes widening. "There's a light." It was faint, distant, but steady. Not lightning, not a dying star. A ship. Gasps echoed in the darkness. But the Vakari officer growled low, his voice like broken stone. "Pray, it is not human." The light grew brighter. The silhouette of a vessel emerged from the swirling clouds, small, scarred, ancient. Its hull was patched with metal plates from a dozen wars, its engines thrumming a sound that seemed too alive, too primal, not sleek like council cruisers, not graceful like Vakari frigates. No, this was a predator's ship, angular, jagged, forged for war, and on its side, faded but unmistakable, was the emblem no alien had seen in generations, the Eagle of Earth. The survivors froze in dread. Every story they had ever been told screamed at them now. The humans had found them, the humans who fought like ghosts, the humans who burned worlds rather than surrender, the humans who never forgot. Human. The ship drifted closer, its lights washing across the alien hull. A docking clamp extended. The survivors watched with wide, unblinking eyes as metal groaned and sealed. A hiss of atmosphere. The hatch creaked open, and in the silence of the dying convoy, footsteps echoed, measured, heavy, unmistakably human. The figure emerged, armored in old Earth colors, helmet under one arm, eyes cold and steady. He scanned the frightened aliens, his voice carrying like iron across the chamber. "If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't still be breathing." The aliens shivered. The nebula pulsed outside like a watching god. They had not been found by raiders. They had been found by the one thing the galaxy still feared: humanity. The council chamber had not fallen silent in centuries. Not during wars, not during famine, not even when planets burned. But tonight, when the word human slipped from trembling lips, silence spread like a sickness. It was not the silence of respect. It was the silence of fear. Holograms flickered across the great chamber, maps of the dead Vale, distorted sensor scans, the last broken message of the convoy. Every projection only deepened the dread. The Osari delegate slammed a scaled fist against the table. Send a fleet. Retrieve the survivors, before they perish. But another voice, a Zarkith, matriarch, with eyes like ice cut across him. And if humans dwell in the Vale, shall we hand them a fleet to slaughter? The word hung, heavier each time it was spoken. Humans, ships that vanished without trace, only to reappear armed with stolen weapons. Armies shattered in the dark by unseen hands. A war the Council swore never to speak of, because victory had been too costly, and the young species, the ones who had never seen humanity, stared in confusion. They are myths, one whispered. Stories told to frighten children, but the elders remembered. They always remembered far away, in the drifting wreck of the convoy. Those same stories poisoned the air. The aliens huddled in flickering light, whispering legends passed down through generations. A Harathi diplomat, with trembling spines, recited, 1. My grandsire swore he saw human soldiers fight without armor, bare skin against plasma fire, laughing as they charged. Another voice cracking added, and they say their ships bleed smoke that blinds sensors, moving as if alive. The Vakari officer bared his fangs. Do you not see? If one has come, we are already dead. But the children, the youngest, of the convoy listened, with wide eyes. Their fear was not the fear of elders. To them, humans sounded less like monsters, and more like heroes out of old tales. Yet the adults knew better. Back in the council chamber, debate turned to chaos. Send drones, shouted one. Send nothing, hissed another. Every moment wasted, they suffocate, cried a third. Finally, the oldest voice rose, a voice that silenced them all. The Varan elder leaned forward, tendrils trembling, and spoke. You do not understand. If the humans found them, they are not dead. They are not alive. They are theirs. The chambers shuddered with gasps. The word theirs carried a weight greater than death, because everyone in that room remembered one thing. When humanity claimed something, they never let it go. In the dark of the nebula, the alien survivors felt it too. The human ship loomed like a predator beside them, engines humming low, lights dimmed to hunting glow. The airlock that had opened to deliver Elias Ward now stood sealed. Some aliens pressed against the glass, staring at the silhouette of the human vessel. Its hull bore scars like trophy slashes of plasma fire, the jagged marks of raider torpedoes. And yet, it endured. One alien whispered, that ship is a ghost from the old wars. Another muttered, why is it here? Why now? The silence deepened until even breath felt dangerous, and then, through the thin walls of their crippled vessel, they heard it. A metallic clang, a deliberate sound, human footsteps moving deeper into their ship. Each strike of boot against floor was a hammer against their courage. Every legend they had ever heard walked closer, and none knew whether it would bring salvation or damnation. Back in the council chamber, the young delegate from the Osari tried to speak. His voice shook. What if the humans are not, as the stories say? The Varan elder's gaze burned into him, heavy with centuries of memory. They are worse. The nebula twisted around the stranded convoy, clouds of blue and crimson rolling, like waves. In its heart, two ships now floated, one broken, one whole. And inside, alien survivors held their breath, waiting to see whether humanity had come to end them, or to keep them. The footsteps grew louder. Metal groaned under the weight of each one, echoing through the dying convoy like the march of an executioner. The aliens pressed tighter together, every species huddled as one. Eyes glowed in the dim light, some with fear, some with hatred, some with a strange, terrible curiosity. The Vakari officer raised his weapon. His claws clicked against the trigger. "First step inside, I end him," he growled. But when the figure finally emerged from the shadows of the corridor, the officer's weapon slipped by instinct. It wasn't the armor, though. It was unlike anything they'd seen. It was old, battered, scarred from countless battles. Not the polished kind the council wore, but armor that looked lived in. Every dent, a story. It wasn't the face, though it was hard and weathered, pale scars across his cheek, eyes, sharp as razors. It was the way he looked at them, not with hunger, not with malice, not with pity, but with command, as though this ruined ship, this frightened assembly, this moment of dread, already belonged to him. The human Elias Ward stopped in the center of the chamber. He set his helmet down with a clang that silenced even the whimpering children. His voice came steady, low, and hard. "If I wanted you dead," he said, eyes scanning every alien face, "you wouldn't still be breathing." The words landed like a blade. Some shrank back, others stiffened. The Vakari officer bared his fangs, but said nothing. The silence stretched until finally, one of the younger aliens, a child, trembling but unblinking, whispered, "Are you going to kill us?" Elias turned his gaze to the child. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smile, not quite. "No," he said, "I'm going to keep you alive." Shock rippled through the crowd. The Harathi diplomat hissed, "Lies. Humans do not save. Humans take." Elias stepped forward, slow, deliberate. The crowd parted without realizing it, instinct bending them aside. "I don't care what your stories say," he replied. "I saw your ships broken, your life support failing. You won't last another day. So you have two choices." He held up two fingers, eyes cold as stone. "Stay here and die." He lowered one finger, "Or come with me and live." The aliens glanced at one another. The silence pulsed, thick as the nebula outside. The Vakari officer finally spat, "And if life with a human is worse than death?" Elias didn't blink. "Then you'll have the honor of being the first to find out." Behind the defiance, fear still ran deep, but fear of the nebula was deeper still. Fear of the air thinning, the lights failing, the endless drift into cold, dark, and for the first time, survival weighed heavier than legends. Slowly, hesitantly, one by one, the aliens lowered their weapons. The Harathi diplomat hissed curses. The Vakari snarled, but none moved against him. The child who had spoken first stepped forward. Small hands clutched a broken trinket, a carved piece of their homeworld. They held it out to Elias, a gift, a plea, a test. Elias stared at it for a moment, then reached down and took it. His massive, scarred hand closed gently around the fragile token, and for the first time, the aliens saw something that did not match their stories. They saw restraint outside. The nebula shifted, crimson clouds curling like a watching eye. Lightning pulsed across the black. The convoy still floated, crippled, but now, tethered to it, was a ship of predators, a human ship, alive with hidden teeth. Inside, a single man stood between myth and survival. Maybe the legends were wrong. Maybe, or maybe they were worse. The human moved through the convoy like he belonged there. Elias Ward carried tools slung across his back, scraps of metal tucked under one arm, his boots echoing through dead corridors. Where alien engineers had given up, he set to work, prying open ruined panels, splicing wires with swift, practiced movements. Sparks flew in bursts of white light, painting his scarred face in ghostly flashes. The aliens followed him at a distance, whispering. "He's repairing our systems," one murmured. "He's binding us for control," another hissed. The Vakari officer growled, claws flexing around his sidearm. "Humans deceive by kindness. Remember the stories." But the stories had never shown this. Life support hummed louder. Oxygen levels ticked upward. The lights brightened from flicker to steady glow. For the first time in days, the survivors drew full breaths. and all of it came from the hands of a human. At mealtime he opened crates from his ship, strange dense rations wrapped in old Earth markings. The smell was sharp, unfamiliar. Suspicion burned in alien eyes. The Harathi diplomat sneered, spines rattling. Poison. Elias tore one open with his teeth, chewed, swallowed, and tossed the rest on the table. Eat or don't. Makes no difference to me. Hunger won. Slowly, one by one, the aliens tried the food. Bitter, heavy, but filling. Energy seeped back into limbs that had been trembling with weakness. The children devoured theirs first. Their laughter soft, hesitant code in the chamber. Strange against the silence that had reigned since the crash. The adults watched with unease, yet they could not deny it. The human was keeping them alive. That night, the Vakari officer prowled. The shadows, weapon in hand. He followed the sound of Ilias's boots until he found the human kneeling beside a console, soldering broken wires with a steady flame. The officer leveled his weapon. What are you truly doing here, human? Elias didn't look up. Keeping your air flowing, unless you'd prefer I stop. The officer's jaw tightened. He saw the tools, the focused hands, and then something else. At the corner of the chamber, a sickly alien child lay curled on a mat, coughing weakly. Elias had left his work to place a thermal blanket over them, his movements rough but careful, before returning to his repairs. The Vakari's weapon wavered. His claws tapped the trigger, but he did not fire. Instead, he slunk back into the shadows, shaken. The next cycle, Elias gathered the able-bodied survivors. He handed out tasks with the clipped precision of a soldier. You seal the fractures. In Bulkhead 7. You sort salvage. You stand watch. The aliens bristled at the orders. Some spat insults. The Harathi diplomat snarled, "You do not command us." Ilias's gaze cut through him. Then go back to waiting for death. See how that works? Silence. Resentment burned in their eyes, but no one walked away. One by one, they followed his orders, and slowly, the broken ship began to look less like a tomb. Still, fear lingered. Every time Elias walked past, voices whispered, monster, predator, human. Every time his hand saved another system, another life, the whispers grew quieter, until one moment broke the silence completely. A child approached him, tiny claws clutching a crude carving, an animal of their homeworld. They held it out, trembling. Elias looked down at it, then at the wide, fearful eyes. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he reached out, scarred fingers closing gently around the gift. He gave a small nod, not thanks, not praise, just acknowledgement. The child smiled, and in that fragile smile, the walls of fear cracked just slightly. Outside, the dead veil stirred. Clouds of crimson and violet coiled like serpents. Lightning crawled across the void. The convoy remained broken, vulnerable, but within, something dangerous was happening. The stories were changing. The aliens no longer whispered, only of monsters now. In the quiet between breaths, they whispered of a protector. It began with a sound no one wanted to hear. The convoy's sensors, patched together by Ilias's rough hands, pinged. Once, twice, then again. Steady, rhythmic, like the beating of a predator's heart. The aliens froze. Eyes darted to one. Another. What is it? The Harathi diplomat whispered, spines rattling. The Vakari officer's claws clenched. Hunters. The screen flickered, showing shapes moving through the mist. Long, sleek shadows glided between the nebulous clouds. Lights glowing blood red. Raiders. Their kind did not fight wars. They fed on desperation. Broken ships. Weak survivors. Exactly what the convoy had become. And now, the beacon they had prayed would save them, had betrayed them. Panic erupted in the chamber. They'll slaughter us. A diplomat cried. We cannot fight. We can barely breathe. Another wailed. Children clung to parents. Soldiers gripped weapons they knew were useless against raider gunships. The scent of fear thickened the air. Elias Ward stood in the center, arms folded. He watched the red blips draw closer, steady and certain, until they were almost upon them. Then, for the first time, he smiled. Let them try. The words landed heavy, cutting through the chaos like a blade. Every alien turned to him, fear colliding with confusion. What do you mean? The Vakari demanded. Elias turned, already striding toward the airlock to his ship. I mean, you've had your stories about humans. Time to see which ones are true. Inside his ship, the old human vessel hummed to life. Systems flared that no alien had seen in centuries. Hidden compartments unfolded, releasing minds that drifted like stars into the nebula. Weapons powered up, not sleek plasma cannons, but brutal, old-world designs that spat death in silence. Elias's hands moved across the console with calm precision. He had done this before. Too many times, on the alien ship, survivors crowded the viewports, watching with wide, unblinking eyes as the human predator prepared its hunt. The raiders drew closer, their engines glowing red. Their signals pulsed across the comms, taunting, hungry. This sector belongs to us. Drop your shields. Make it easy. We'll take the living. Sell the rest. The aliens trembled. The Vakari officer snarled in helpless rage. The Harathi diplomat whispered, "It's over." Then Ilias's voice crackled through the shared comms, calm, cold, human. You should have stayed hungry. The first raider ship vanished in a burst of fire. A mine, cloaked by the nebula, detonated beneath its hull. Wreckage spun through the mist, lighting the clouds in a bloom of red flame. Panic rippled through the raider comms. What was that? Eyes sharp. We're not alone. Too late. Another explosion flared. Then another. The nebula itself seemed to burn, mines striking like vipers, each one laid with human cunning. The convoy trembled under the shock waves. Children cried out. Adults stared, stunned, as the hunter became prey. Through the mist, Elias's ship emerged. No sleek elegance, no glowing banners, just a jagged predator, teeth bared, guns spitting fire. His vessel slipped between raider ships like a shadow, striking from behind, vanishing again into the clouds. One alien gasped, "He's toying with them," another whispered, "No, he's teaching them fear." The Council's legends had not lied. Humans did not fight battles. They ended them. The raiders broke. Their comms dissolved into panicked shrieks. Engines roared as survivors tried to flee into the deeper mist. Ili's voice cut across them one last time. "Run, and remember who hunted you here." Silence followed. The wrecks of raider ships drifted, burning, their light fading into the nebula's endless dark. The aliens stared, breathless, at the human ship now floating calm, engines idling like the heartbeat of a beast at rest. No one spoke. No one dared. Finally, the Vakari officer whispered, voice shaking. The stories were true. Elias Ward's voice broke the silence, steady, almost bored. Stories don't matter. Survival does. Outside, the nebula coiled and twisted, its colors painted with fire and wreckage. Inside, the aliens trembled, caught between terror and awe. For the first time, they understood. They were safer with the monster than without him. The nebula was on fire. Explosions rippled through the mist, blooming like dying suns. Clouds of crimson and violet lit up with every detonation, painting the void in violent beauty. Wreckage spun like shrapnel through the haze-broken wings. Shattered hulls, bodies tumbling in silence. The convoy shuddered beneath the shockwaves. Aliens pressed to the viewports, their faces lit by fire, their hearts pounding with something far worse than fear. Elias Ward's ship moved like no machine they had ever seen. It did not glide. It stalked. Engines flared only in bursts, vanishing between clouds, striking from shadows. One moment it was gone, The next it tore through a raider gunship, guns blazing. Plasma fire clawed at its hull, but the human vessel twisted, ducked, and rammed its predator's teeth straight into the raider's heart. The aliens gasped as the raider ship split apart, fire spilling into the nebula like blood in water. The Harathi diplomat clutched the railing, voice breaking. He's not fighting them, he's hunting them. The Vakari officer growled, though even his voice shook. This is what humans do. They turn war into art. The raiders tried to regroup. Signals flashed across the comms orders: panic, desperation. Ships wheeled in formation, weapons locking on. Elias didn't give them the chance. He triggered his minds in sequence, a storm of light erupting in perfect arcs. The formation collapsed, ships colliding in chaos, their screams tearing through the channels before static consumed them. The nebula thundered, clouds boiling with fire, and still the human ship pressed forward. Inside the convoy, the survivors trembled. Children hid their faces against parents. Adults stood frozen, torn between terror and the terrible relief of knowing those guns weren't pointed at them. The Harathi diplomat whispered, "He's a demon." The Vakari officer's claws dug grooves into metal. "No, he's worse. He's human." A silence stretched. Even the children seemed to understand. The galaxy had forgotten what humanity was capable of. Now they remembered. On the comms, a raider captain's voice broke through, desperate, pleading. "Human, we'll withdraw. Leave us the convoy." Reply came cold, stripped of mercy. "You made your choice the moment you came here." His ship surged forward, guns roaring. The raider's scream cut short as the vessel erupted in fire. The last survivors fled into the deep mist. Engines flared bright, vanishing into the dark beyond the nebula's folds. Elias let them go. For a moment, the nebula was still. Smoke drifted, wreckage spun. The convoy floated in the heart of it all, fragile, silent, trembling. The human ship turned slowly, its scarred hull glowing red in the fire's reflection. Its guns were quiet now. Its engines beat like a heart at rest, and for the first time since they'd vanished into the veil, the convoy was safe. Ilias's voice came over the intercom.com/flat, as though the massacre had been nothing more than routine maintenance. "You're clear, for now." The aliens looked at one another. No cheers, no gratitude, only silence. Because they understood, the Council's stories hadn't exaggerated. They hadn't lied. They hadn't even captured half the truth. Humans were monsters in battle, ruthless, efficient, terrifying. But tonight, that monster had been theirs. Outside, the dead veil curled back into silence. Its clouds swallowed the wreckage, hiding the fire, as though nothing had happened at all. But the survivors would never forget. They had seen the truth with their own eyes, and the legend of humanity no longer lived in whispers. It burned in fire. The battlefield was quiet. Wreckage drifted through the nebula, still glowing red from fire. Shattered raider ships turned slowly in the haze, their screams long since silenced. But the silence inside the convoy was louder still. No cheers, no relief, no cries of victory, only the weight of what they had just seen. Elias Ward sat in the cockpit of his ship, helmet resting on the console, eyes fixed on the dying glow outside. His face was unreadable, carved in stone, as if he had not just slaughtered a fleet but merely completed a task. On the convoy, the survivors whispered in corners. "He destroyed them all. Did you see how he fought? Not like ships, like predators. He's a demon wrapped in flesh." The Vakari officer stood, apart, claws tight around his weapon. His voice trembled with fury, but not at Elias, at himself. "We would be ash without him, without a human." The words stung. No one argued. Later, they gathered in the central chamber. Survivors of a dozen species, diplomats, soldiers, and children, all of them alive because of a human, and none knew what to do with that truth. The Harathi diplomat slammed a clawed hand against the wall. We cannot tell the council. If they learn of this, panic will spread like fire. Humanity will not be feared. They will be hunted. The Vakari snarled, better the council fear truth than we cower in lies. A younger alien, voice trembling, said what none wanted to admit. But he saved us. If we lie, do we not dishonor that? Silence, heavy, unbearable. At the far end of the chamber, the hatch opened. Elias stepped inside. The whispers died. Instantly. He looked at them, every eye burning into him, and said nothing. The Harathi diplomat's spines rattled. You are no savior. You are proof of every story we feared. Elias didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just looked at them, tired, steady, unflinching. I don't need your thanks, he said quietly. I don't need your trust. I only need you to live. The words struck harder than any weapon. He left as silently as he came, boots echoing down the corridor in his absence. Debate ignited like wildfire. He is manipulating us. No, he has no reason to lie. If we tell the council, they'll destroy him. If we stay silent, we become conspirators. Every word was laced with fear, not just of Elias, but of what came next. Meanwhile, the children played with scraps of metal Elias had given them, laughing softly. To them, there was no debate. He was the one who had saved them, the one who had fed them, the one who had kept the monsters away. They did not see him as a demon. They saw him as a shield, and slowly, that realization bled into the hearts of their parents, carving cracks in fear. That night, the Vakari officer stood watch near the viewport. The nebula coiled outside, silent, patient, eternal. I'll get you out of here. After that, what you do with the truth is your choice, but understand this truth has teeth, and it bites back. The Vakari officer closed his eyes, the weight of those words heavy as stone. The council awaited their return, but whether the survivors spoke of what had happened, or buried it in silence, that decision would shape the galaxy. The dead veil spat them out like bones from a predator's maw. The convoy emerged from the swirling mists, battered but alive, hulls scarred, engines flickering but intact. Behind them, the nebula closed, hiding the wreckage, the fire, the screams. It was as if the slaughter had never happened. Only those who survived carried the truth. On the comms, the council's beacon pulsed bright, answering their signal at last. Convoy 672, your distress has been logged. Rescue fleet inbound. Hold position. Cheers erupted from the survivors. Tears spilled. Families clung to each other, relief flooding through the chamber like sunlight after endless night. But beneath the joy lurked another shadow. The truth that a human had saved them, and the question of whether they would ever dare speak it. Elias Ward stood on the deck of his ship, arms crossed, watching the stars. He knew what came next. The council's ships would arrive. They would take the survivors, patch their wounds, and demand their stories, stories that could burn him alive. He had seen it before, how the galaxy feared what it did not understand. And humans, most of all, were never understood. His ship hummed. Beneath him, engines, restless. He could leave, slip into the stars before the council arrived. No one could stop him, but he stayed, because he had promised them safety. And promises mattered. On the convoy, the survivors gathered one last time, faces pale, eyes weary, hearts torn. The Harathi diplomat hissed, spines rattling. We must tell the council. Humanity cannot be allowed to rise again unchecked. The Vakari officer's claws curled tight. And yet, without him, we would not be here to speak at all. Murmurs rippled, doubt, fear, gratitude. The younger alien spoke softly, trembling but firm. If the council knew, they would destroy him, and us, for keeping the secret. But if we lie, The Vakari cut in, voice low. We protect the only shield that stood between us and death. The chamber fell silent. One by one, eyes turned toward Ilias's ship, and in that silence, the decision was made. The rescue fleet arrived in a blaze of light. Sleek council vessels surrounded the convoy. Their banners bright and proud, council voices filled the comms, formal, precise, demanding reports. The Harathi diplomat stepped forward, spines trembling, when the council demanded to know how they had survived. He hesitated. Every survivor held their breath. Then he spoke. Raiders struck in the Vale. They underestimated us. We fought back, together, and we survived. The words rang hollow, a lie gilded in truth. But no one corrected him. The council recorded his report. Satisfied, and the secret of Elias Ward remained, locked in the hearts of those who owed him their lives. As the survivors were escorted aboard the rescue ships, children turned back, waving, toward the jagged silhouette of the human vessel. Elias stood at the viewport, watching, for the first time. His lips curved in something almost like a smile. Then his engines flared. Without a word, his ship slipped into the stars, vanishing into the void, gone, but not forgotten. In the days to come, the survivors would tell their stories, carefully, cautiously, each word chosen. They would never speak of the human. Not to the council, not to the galaxy, but in the quiet of night, when fear returned, they would remember the firestorm in the Vale. They would remember the predator who had fought for them, and they would whisper his name like a prayer. Elias Ward, human. The monster who kept them safe, the dead. Vale spat them out like bones from a predator's maw. The convoy emerged from the swirling mists, battered but alive, hulls scarred, engines flickering, but intact. Behind them, the nebula closed, hiding the wreckage, the fire, the screams. It was as if the slaughter had never happened. Only those who survived carried the truth. On the comms, the council's beacon pulsed bright, answering their signal at last. Convoy 672, your distress has been logged. Rescue fleet inbound. Hold position. Cheers erupted from the survivors. Tears spilled. Families clung to each other, relief flooding through the chamber like sunlight after endless night. But beneath the joy lurked another shadow. The truth that a human had saved them, and the question of whether they would ever dare speak it. Elias Ward stood on the deck of his ship, arms crossed, watching the stars. He knew what came next. The council's ships would arrive. They would take the survivors, patch their wounds, and demand their stories, stories that could burn him alive. He had seen it before, how the galaxy feared what it did not understand. And humans, most of all, were never understood. His ship hummed. Beneath him, engines, restless. He could leave, slip into the stars before the council arrived. No one could stop him, but he stayed, because he had promised them safety. And promises mattered. On the convoy, the survivors gathered one last time, faces pale, eyes weary, hearts torn. The Harathi diplomat hissed, spines rattling. We must tell the council. Humanity cannot be allowed to rise again unchecked. The Vakari officer's claws curled tight. And yet, without him, we would not be here to speak at all. Murmurs rippled, doubt, fear, gratitude. The younger alien spoke softly, trembling but firm. If the council knew, they would destroy him, and us, for keeping the secret. But if we lie, the Vakari cut in, voice low. We protect the only shield that stood between us and death. The chamber fell silent. One by one, eyes turned toward Ilias's ship, and in that silence, the decision was made. The rescue fleet arrived in a blaze of light. Sleek council vessels surrounded the convoy. Their banners bright and proud, council voices filled the comms, formal, precise, demanding reports. The Harathi diplomat stepped forward, spines trembling, when the council demanded to know how they had survived. He hesitated. Every survivor held their breath. Then he spoke. Raiders struck in the Vale. They underestimated us. We fought back. Together. And we survived. The words rang hollow, a lie gilded in truth. But no one corrected him. The council recorded his report. Satisfied. And the secret of Elias Ward remained, locked in the hearts of those who owed him their lives. As the survivors were escorted aboard the rescue ships, children turned back, waving, toward the jagged silhouette of the human vessel. Elias stood at the viewport, watching. For the first time, his lips curved in something almost like a smile. Then, his engines flared. Without a word, his ship slipped into the stars, vanishing into the void. Gone, but not forgotten. In the days to come, the survivors would tell their stories carefully, cautiously, each word chosen. They would never speak of the human, not to the council, not to the galaxy, but in the quiet of night, when fear returned. They would remember the firestorm in the Vale. They would remember the predator who had fought for them, and they would whisper his name like a prayer. Elias Ward, human, the monster who kept them safe.